Well, hey y'all, happy Monday. Well, welcome back. It's June 15th, which is the first day of monsoon season, and it's second springtime here in Arizona. Now, because it's so dang hot, you're probably like, what do you mean second spring? But essentially, that's what monsoon season is for us here in Arizona. So today, we're gonna chat about what monsoon season is all about. Monsoon gardening, what you can plant, what you should plant, and what you should be doing to get yourself ready for our next season of gardening here in Arizona. So let's check it out. So if you're like me, you might be to a point where it feels like the summer heat is just taking over your garden and there's just going to be no more success to be had. Maybe you've picked a couple things, but maybe you're like me and you got into the spring planting game a little late, and so maybe you didn't get to pick that much stuff. But the good news is that here in Arizona with our monsoon season, we actually get a whole other planting season tucked in between our spring and fall winter gardens, and that's our monsoon garden. And so I wanted to chat with you a little bit about all the different facets of that, as well as what you can plant and what you can do to get ready. So first of all, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about monsoon season here in Arizona. If you're not from Arizona, it seems like the craziest idea that this dry desert could come up with these incredible thunderstorms and rainstorms and just crazy wild calamities during this season. Now what happens, and this is not me as a meteorologist explaining this, but the basics of it have to do with, if you think about like the southern part of the United States, during this time of year, like May and June, where it gets really dry here in Arizona, the jet streams of air move up towards the north, which causes kind of like a vacuum that sucks air from the Gulf of Mexico and from the Sea of Cortez, which is just south of us in Mexico. And when it does that, it pulls a lot of moisture and humidity into the atmosphere over the southwest here, and then when the sun and the heat meet up with that moisture, it's I think it's called like a circumvented thunderstorm. So it's kind of like a backwards thunderstorm, if you will, because that meeting between the dry heat here and that moisture and humidity coming up is what creates kind of the moisture needed to have the precipitation, to have the thunderstorms. And then on top of that, we've also got the haboob storms, or the microbursts that come up from the pressure in the ground and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on with it, and we are here in North America. This is the one area of North America that really gets this monsoon effect, and there's lots of places all over the world that do it. Okay, so over the years, obviously the Native Americans that were here well before us learned to plant with that monsoon season. And so we as gardeners, if we don't have the best luck with our early spring garden, then we get our second spring garden chance, if you will, when all that moisture comes back into the valley. So the first thing I would suggest, like the three kind of things I would say that you'd want to do to get your monsoon garden going, is pull out everything that doesn't look so great, that's having a hard time. So the stuff that you planted in April and March, especially things like squashes, cucumbers, stuff like that, because you're going to get another chance to plant those here in monsoon season. So if you got, like you're going to see in the tour here in a minute, I ripped out a lot of stuff in the garden, and that's hard sometimes for, like my husband. He feels like all of our hard work just went out the door. But if we don't pull those plants out of our garden, then those weak plants become like the perfect environment for aphids and for all types of other insects and pests to come into your garden. So it's kind of like a catch-22. Do you want to deal with all those pests because you're hoping that you're going to get another round out of that plant? or do you want to just do the tough work and cut the plant down and remove it? Because most things, most squashes, if you think about it, they have a life cycle. So it's like seed, plant, vegetation, blooms, makes fruit, and then it's naturally supposed to die. So if it's a squash and it doesn't look way brand new looking, like I've got a couple of squash under my shade cloth that went through a new growth cycle and have lots of new growth on them and very little old growth that's yellowing. I'm keeping those around. And if you're gonna keep some things around, definitely trim up what you can as far as old dead brown leaves, because those, again, you don't want extra energy going to that part of the plant, and it's also a way to not set up an invitation for aphids or pests like that. So that would be the first thing I'd say to do here in the next week or so to get ready for your monsoon garden. And then the next thing I would do is kind of go through a refortification process with your beds. And so for me, what that'll look like is tomorrow we're going to go down and get several bags of the sifted compost from the Arizona worm farm. So you could get compost from down there, you could get some compost from the nursery, or you could get worm castings and use those to kind of refortify the top of your bed, to add back in some organic matter and just kind of revitalize and freshen up your bed. And then and do that in your containers too, you know, so if you've had squashes or other plants or other things in your containers, your grow bags, your buckets if you're using them, or just other type of planting containers, go in and add another layer, a fresh layer of, like I said, either compost or worm castings, or even maybe some manure. If you've got some really good finished manure, you could use that to top off as well. So then the last thing is what to plant, you know. So when we think about our monsoon garden, you want to just kind of stick to the ABCs. So A for Amaranth. And an amaranth is a pretty cool plant that you can grow, I believe, both for the grain and for the leaves. And it's a plant that does really well here in Arizona during this time, does real well with the drought, and is able to sustain on that little bit of moisture that comes in from the monsoon seasons. And it's great as far as a leafy green that you can pick and eat in your salad. So ABCs, amaranth, and then the B would be beans. So that's going to be a lot of the cowpea varieties, like the black-eyed pea, the Tipperary bean, as well as some common beans like the snake bean or the long bean, yard long bean. And then the C in the ABCs is going to be corn. So that can be anything from your sweet corn to your flour corns to maybe even the popcorn like the Jim corn variety. And then ABCs with the S on the end of it is our squash. And so there's also another thing that's really synonymous with monsoon planting, and that's the Three Sisters garden. And the Three Sisters, a lot of people say that their fourth sister that nobody talks about is, again, the amaranth, but that is an ideal planting family right there. Planting your corn right there with your beans and with your squash. The squash is going to cover up and cool your soil. Your beans are going to be able to grow up your corn, and then your corn is going to have a great opportunity to get another round here in Arizona. Remember that your corn is going to be a big feeder. So if you're going to plant corn somewhere, definitely make sure that you go in and add a good rich nitrogen source to your soil. And then also remember that for your corn, especially since we're not planting in fields, you really want to plant them close together, and maybe in a circle or in blocks of 2s and 4s. You can't plant just one corn. A corn has to have another plant nearby to complete its pollination process. But by planting them closely to each other, you're just increasing the opportunities for pollination to occur. Because if you think about a corn cob, out of the top of the corn cob is the silks that we see. Well, when those silks are first forming, every single one of those silks is connected to the tiny little kernel of corn on a corn cob. So when the tassels form on the corn, which is where the pollination takes place, is from the tassels that go onto the pollination. The pollen comes from the tassels, which comes down and gets onto the silks. That's how the pollination occurs. So you can help your plants along, but the best solution, like I said, is to have them planted closely together so that the movement, so that the wind, all those things can aid in the transfer of pollen from the tassels to the silk. And again, the silk is those little pieces of corn on your cob, so you want to get them as pollinated as possible. So those are my tips for corn planting. And then if you want to get a little bit more connected also to kind of like the ancestral gardening or farming of Arizona, I definitely would encourage you, and I think I'm even going to do it because I am pretty curious about Amaranth. I've got lots of corns, but there's a couple of unique kind of southwest squashes that I'm curious about. So if you're like me in that regard, I would definitely recommend maybe picking up some seeds from Native Seed Search, and I talked about them last week in my Gardening in Arizona 101 video. But definitely, like I said, it will definitely benefit you to be planting anything that is more native to this area, that is more kind of in tune to the monsoon season. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to plant your more traditional seeds that you may have gotten from Baker or Burpee or Fairy Morse, or wherever you get your seeds. So it's not just the ABCs either. Obviously, you still got till about July, mid-July, you can still plant the Armenian cucumbers. You could throw in some normal cucumbers. And the coolest thing that has nothing to do with monsoon planting is that it's tomato time again. It's second spring. So if you are like me and you just totally busted the failure on tomatoes for this year, now is your time to start again today. So literally here in the next 2 or 3 days, I've got some new seedling trays that I got in from Amazon that'll help me grow inside and outside. So I'm gonna get one of those trays. I've got plenty of solo cups already ready, and then I'm gonna get several different varieties of tomato plants going in my cups, and then I'm gonna actually do them. I'm gonna grow them right outside, right over there by the tomatoes where they're at right now. That way I don't have to go through any process of acclimating them or getting them adjusted to the temperatures out here. And so I'm stoked about that. So again, if you didn't get something that you wanted this summer, or you just didn't have good success with tomatoes like me, I'm going to keep letting the ones that I've got going, I'm going to keep letting them grow, and I'm going to refortify the bags and bring up the soil levels immensely. But still, if they don't make it, and beyond anything, I am so determined to become a good tomato grower that I'm just going to keep growing tomatoes until I get it right. So this is me taking my next big step, and hopefully I'm going to have the same success that I finally had with my strawberry bed. But it's tomato time, and that's the best time ever. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope that you take some time to pull out the old stuff, and if you feel like you're behind in the game, definitely get yourself geared up this week and maybe this weekend to get your monsoon planting going. You don't have to get it all done this week. This is just when monsoon season starts, so you really kind of got the next, from now until about July 15th, to get your monsoon garden in. That way you'll be right on time for harvesting through the fall. And another thing I want to say is you could start to get some pumpkins going right now too. Think about pumpkins kind of being in that squash family, along with the cucumbers and stuff that you can bring back in. So I hope that helps, and I hope you're going to plant a monsoon garden with me. Well, I hope that makes you feel a little bit better. Like maybe if you didn't get a full-on spring garden in, but then you've decided that you really want to start this journey in gardening in Arizona, you still have plenty of time to be planting a lot of the things that your friends in the South just got into planting. So I hope that you're going to dive into getting into a monsoon garden, and more than anything, I hope, like me, you're going to take your second round at some tomatoes for the year. Well, I hope you have the best day ever, and I look forward to chatting with you next week. Until then, keep your garden growing.